Hey, Thrand here, and I'm here with a very exciting episode. We haven't done an interview with anybody in a very long time, and especially about Deadliest Warrior. And I have one of the most important people from the entire program on today. He's going to talk about all the episodes in the first season, all the way up. Some very exciting things. Mark Fenlason. He's also known as Red Dog, and he is a production. What is it? I'll let you introduce yourself on that. That would be better.
I'm a production designer, special effects specialist, and a weapons master.
Yeah, and I can tell from some of the stuff that we've talked about previously, before we decided to set this interview up, you pretty much did everything on the show. You set up all the tests, everything that made it exciting. You set up all the analogs and the weapons test and the explosives and the firearms. You helped procure weapons for the show. You've done just about everything. If it wasn't for you, from what I understand, we've just had a bunch of actors and stuntmen and martial artists arguing with each other about who would have won that didn't really know what was going on or what was happening. That's what I understand.
That would be true. I would like to add a small caveat to that, I had an amazing team of professionals working alongside me in my department, who are, to some of them are still working with me to this very day. And so it was a united team effort. There was at least, I believe, 9 of us in the department, and I was the head of the department.
Awesome. So you were the big boss, pretty much.
I was. I was. And a lot of times too, there are several key moments where my hands are actually the ones wielding the weapons, just because of proficiency and safety and a lot of other really good reasons. So
you told me there was a story where you actually did the halberd or the polearm or the knight.
Right. The halberd, yes. That's actually that attack on that dummy is actually me attacking that dummy. And my favorite part of the clip that you showed me was watching Max and everybody react to what I was doing.
Right. They were just going off. They were freaking out.
They were behind me. I couldn't see them at all. I could see the production crew off to the right who were filming, and I could see their reactions. But anybody who's been in martial arts understands, or anybody who's had any sort of military combat training knows that you get a kind of a tunnel vision and you're focused on what it is you're doing. So they're peripheral notes that your brain makes, but you don't really pay attention to them.
Correct.
So when you showed me that, I think that was the first time I'd ever actually seen that reaction before. And that to me was my favorite part of the clip, was just
their reactions as you were going off, and you were using it properly. I could not say anything was wrong. That was excellent. The way you split the head down the center at the end into the bottom.
Well, in all honesty, I was well motivated. It would have been a very rough time on the show to that point, and there was a lot of tension in the room, and it was a great way to sort of relieve said tension and effectively give a demonstration.
Oh, certainly. That's the best time. I've actually had that when I'm frustrated with an analog or something and gone off on it. I had an episode a long time ago where that kind of happened to me, and the guy that worked with me was unable to cut through this head with a dagger. I ended up taking the entire head off because I just kind of went off. I was like, give it to me. Let me do it.
That was one of the critical analysis that we tried to impart to the production company, that it's not just about the mythos of the man or the warrior, and it's not about the structural capabilities of the weapon. It is the combination of both and how they're used, in a life or death situation. And certainly, anytime you're putting one warrior up against another, that qualifies as a life.
Here's the question though. The gentleman who was representing the night, was he just an actor? Because I looked at the scene before you actually did it, and he doesn't look like he knows how to use a polearm very well. I mean, I'm just looking at the way he swung it around. It looked like Jim Carrey trying to be funny or something instead of somebody using a polearm. I'm not trying to put the guy down. I'm just saying it looked like he knew what he was doing with that polearm. And then all of a sudden you see this expert killing going on. You can almost tell something's wrong.
Well, I'll tell you what. I went up to this guy, and it was my job to sort of, motivate him and educate him and try to get him to use it. And he kept poking at it. And he was not engaging his target. And he didn't have it. He didn't have the, I'm going to kill this. This is going through. I'm not hitting the front of it. I'm going through it. He didn't have that mentality. I think too, they also had to edit out my voice in that, because I was yelling things like die, kill, or something like that.
Yeah, and it wasn't this guy that we just saw swinging his pole arm around going, well, first of all, I would keep him back with it. I'm like, that didn't sound very convincing to me. He knew how to use it.
I'm almost certain that one of my first thrusts or something. I think I caught it.
No offense to the guy who did that. I'm not trying to offend him. I'm just saying it just didn't seem like the same two together when you see the scene of the thing dying.
To be honest with you, that was often true about a lot of episodes that our, professionals or our experts or whatever they were, had it not been for myself and my staff, whose hobbies and whose lifestyle has always been weapons of medieval, basically weapons in general. Steve was our guy for a lot of stuff. And quite frankly, we would stand on either side and we would just feed them information and let them get their shot.
Like you're saying, you gave them lines a lot of times. You'd be the ones trying to tell them what to say about something, because they probably did.
Yeah, they would say, talk about this. And a lot of these people really fit the bill in terms of what they wanted somebody to look like, but didn't really have anywhere near the background or the expertise that they were talking about or that they were trying to portray. And part of the problem is that my crew was always fighting for the integrity of the show in many ways, to be accurate, to be honest. And, they didn't know as much about the history of it as did. Because we were called upon by the production a lot of times to say, hey, can you fill this in? Can you help us out? And since we were the ones that were making the Mongolian bows and arrows and, securing the katana and just, all of that stuff, we already knew this stuff in our sleep anyway. So it was pretty easy for us to help, fill in.
Let's talk about the first episode. You were saying that Apache versus Gladiator is going to be one of your most favorite episodes and the most realistic in your opinion.
Well, both of the warriors that were portrayed in that were the real McCoy. That was one of those rare times where you could say
Snake Blocker. I'm actually friends with Snake online, so Snake, if you see it.
Snake Blocker. Snake Blocker is my blood brother, and we became very good friends on that show. We bonded, and I can tell the story of the first time I met Snake Blocker. We'd seen talent come in, and I had made these targets, which I think you'll have a picture of. You'll see it. It's like a human shooting silhouette on an aluminum frame. And what those really are is there's about 4 inches of cork. And you have to kind of understand the setup that I'm here in this. There's kind of a semicircle. There's a cameraman on either side of me. There's a producer. There's the showrunner and probably another cameraman. So there's like 6 of us standing there. Behind us in another semicircle are all the targets. And Snake Blocker is walking up to us for the very first time. I hadn't actually even been formally introduced to the man. As he's walking towards us, and cameras weren't really rolling, they were just sort of there, he starts throwing things off of his person. He had 32 different knives on him. And I'm standing there, and these knives, and I knew instantly, make like a fence post, and you're not going to get hurt. The camera guys who were like wearing shorts and flip-flops, they had no idea. They had no idea how dangerous their situation was or how close to death they came. They just had no clue. I could tell instantly this guy was hitting everything he was aiming at.
Yeah, he wasn't going to hit anybody. He was aiming and hitting exactly what he wanted to.
And it happened like that. I've never seen any, just so precise. And it was like something out of a Marvel movie. He was just throwing those knives. And everybody kind of freaked out. The production company wasn't prepared for that. The producers weren't prepared for that. So they were having kind of a moment. So I took Snake off to the side, and I said, okay, 2 things. Number 1, don't ever do that again. Number 2, that was really cool. Oh, I think it was that moment right there that the 2 of us became like blood brothers in the moment. I was like, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and take your knives off, and let me I'll take custody of these knives. We're going to have you stand over here and throw the knives we have and that sort of thing. Because he just didn't know. He's a Special Forces knife weapons instructor. Right. That's the word he comes from.
Military, yeah.
And he's the real deal. He's the most authentic human being I've ever met in my life. And I worked closely with Snake Blocker to ensure the authenticity of the Apache fighting style and the knife style, and to make sure that it was all on the level. Because I wanted to get it right. It felt really important to me to get it right. And he was great to work with. He had a lot of information. He'd seen that we'd done a lot of research anyway, so he realized, hey, you're really putting the effort out here.
Sure,
this is spot on. So there was a lot of mutual respect back and forth. In fact, he, let me just reach over here to step out of frame. So he, at the end of our association, because he brought in a couple of knives, he actually gave me this knife, which is beautiful bone-handled knife, because I had actually been approached by production. This was like a day or two before we shot the episode. The producer said, you know, we need something better, because this Gladiator coming off really well. His gear and his style and his stuff, really formidable, really well done. And, you know, the Apache's got like a hatchet, and they weren't really impressed. They wanted something a little bit more magical for him. And so they said, we need him to have, like, you know, dealing with poisonous animals. And I was like, if you talk about snakes, you let me know when that episode's over, because I'm not going to be here for that. And it was also
first. Is that Indiana Jones and you coming out?
I'm very much. I don't do the snake thing. I'll screw that. So they said, you know, come up with something. Well, it was the first week of December, and you know, so Shoppings and Nightmare were working 12 hours a day. There happened to be a Petco around the corner from me, so I thought, well, let me go in here and see what I can find. Maybe there's a scorpion or something. Who knows? And I went in and I told the guy at the Petco straight away, like, I'm working on this show, Deadliest Warrior. I need a really aggressive, venomous bug of some kind. You know, I need something. And as it would turn out, he said, you know, I have this Empire Scorpion back here, and she's a real bitch. She's taken over the group, and we can't even get her hand in the cage. And she was about that big. I mean, she was massive mandibles, big old tail, bad attitude. The guy said he couldn't even get his hand in the cage and would go through the glove. And I think it was supposed to be $24 or $25. And he said, listen, you're serious about buying this? I'll sell it to you for $12 and I'll throw it in the tank. Like, he wanted it out of his store. So I thought, okay, great. You know, this solves my problem. Big Empire Scorpions, by the way, are the big black ones. And that's usually what you see in movies, because their stinger is equivalent of, say, a bee sting. Now, their mandibles, their pinch, they'll cut you pretty good. So sure enough, we bring it in. And I tell Snake Blocker about the story I just told you, and he goes, okay. And this is no bullshit, folks. He walks over and starts, he starts speaking Apache to the scorpion. And as pretty as you please, the scorpion just crawls right up in his hand, and we shot the whole sequence with him talking to it, and they did the whole voiceover about how they had this oneness with nature, and the shot worked. And I couldn't believe that this scorpion that I had personally seen to be very aggressive was like his little pet chihuahua in his hand. It was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen in my life. And I held on to that scorpion for I think another 3 years. It stayed in my office, and we were very happy with it. And we got the shot. And that was the important thing. The producers were like, "Oh my God, that was a great shot."
So that was all you. There wouldn't have been a scorpion for him. He didn't bring it with him or something. It wasn't his pet. Or if it wasn't for you to go procure this thing and bring it there to have something to make him, you know, show off the Apache skills there. And he actually had them. So that makes it really
that was the part that killed me about it. And honestly, had it not been for Petco selling scorpions in the middle of December, I wouldn't have been able to find one at all. But it was great. It was one of those things that was a kind of a magic moment. It worked out.
And you got to hang out with Chuck Liddell as well during that episode, correct?
Oh, yes, Chuck Liddell. Well, we made the Gladiuses that he punched on. Let me tell you about Chuck Liddell. So I've worked with a lot of people in his profession before, Ken Shamrock, and I've met a lot of wrestlers and multi-fighters. And, you know, it's not really my world. I'm going to be very honest. I mean, obviously respect the craft and the talent, but I don't know these people on name recognition the way most people do. So I just knew that he was an incredible badass and that he was a very formidable person. And you know, he was going to come in, he was going to punch this rack of meat that we had. So we rigged the beef, which was not as easy as it sounds, because you want to get the right amount of tension on it. So there's a little bit of give. And I believe Steve made those Gladius gloves.
The Cistus, I believe the traditional line, I think is Cistus, where they can be wraps for the hand, but then they have spikes and stuff on them. So increase the depth. Yeah, I do have a picture. I'll put that up for everyone. They're leather with spikes, pretty much. Gloves.
And Steve made those. I'm looking at him now. He made those. I think it took him a day to make those, you know. And so Chuck comes in and he has his kids, and his kids were great. Now imagine being like, I think they were like 14 or 12 and 8 or something like that. You know, they weren't very old. But imagine being a boy of 14 or 8 years old and coming into a warehouse that has 1 or 2 of every weapon ever made. And I mean, that's just ridiculous. And they're sitting in chairs, you know, having a soda, looking at the weapons cage.
And we have pics of the children as well, trying on armor and stuff.
Yeah. So I went to Chuck at one point. We were talking, and I said something. I said, you know, with your permission, if you'd like, you know, I'd like to let the boys have a moment, and they can go through the weapons cage, and you know, we'll be right there to supervise. He goes, oh yeah, no, absolutely. And these young men were so well behaved. They were so well behaved, and they were giddy. The second, I mean, they, you know, picking up an AK-47 and putting on a Viking helmet and holding a gladiator sword. I mean, they just had a blast, and they were delightful people. But I got to tell you, when I met Chuck the first time, I was like, oh my God, this guy is just one solid. He's just a machine. I mean, he's like the Terminator. And you know, we rigged up the meat, and we had a meter on it so we could tell how hard he was punching. And in the first couple of warm-up takes they did on it, you could tell instantly that he was maybe at 30% power. If he went full 100% power, he could have put his fist right through that thing.
I believe you. I believe you.
It was like, he reminds me of the Marvel character Juggernaut, because he could just run through walls. He looks like he's so solid. Put a cone on his head, and he could do that. And you know, like all of the gentlemen in that profession that I've ever met, very polite, very cool, very well spoken, very soft spoken. So it was obviously a delight to be around him. But when he hit that beef, let me tell you, folks, he's the real deal. He's 100% real deal. And he could have just, you know, it was impressive. It was really impressive. And he was very complimentary about the work with me on the gloves. He loved those, and he looked good wearing them, you know. And when he hit that beef the last time, I got for sure he was going right through it, because we had it bolted down top and bottom. It wasn't going anywhere. So if anything was going to give, it was going to be the bones and the meat. And it was very impressive, very impressive. And again, he was such a generous guy. It's so wonderful, and his kids were so great. We all had a blast. We had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I thought that was cool how you let his kids wear the armor and hold different things and shields and stuff. So we'll put those pictures up and let everybody see that. That sounds like it was a lot of fun being on set of Deadliest Warrior as well.
What I can tell you is I'm a former 8-year-old boy myself, and I know exactly how I would have felt if I had been standing that close to stuff I wanted to touch all my life. And like I said, the first...
And they went off, too, getting to go in there, Chuck Liddell and everybody getting to go into your cage full of weapons. You were saying they loved that as well, right?
Oh, they did. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean, what kid wouldn't, really? And,
firearms, swords, axes.
That's that. It's one of those things where what other opportunity in life are these kids going to have 5 or 6 weapons experts standing right by and be able to say, here, pick this up, touch that, wear that. This is how this was used. This is who made this. For them, it was paradise. You know, they were just in heaven. You know, they probably still remember that. And
I would enjoy it myself, I'm sure.
I'm sure when they went back to school the next couple of days, they were top guys on campus because you know, because of what they actually got to hold. You know, the one of them was wearing the Viking helmet, holding the AK. You could just see him grinning through the mask. He was having a blast. He loved it, and it was fun. And like I said, the children were so well behaved, and Chuck himself was such a nice guy. That it's just kind of hard to reconcile just how nice of a guy he was. And since then, I've obviously, you know, watched him fight. You look at what a nice gentleman he was versus how hard he fights, and you know, it's hard to believe those are in the same
balance. Good balance for a warrior to be a nice gentleman, but also a brutal warrior. You put that together, and you've got a whole man, pretty much, a good person.
And that's really the footnote for the entire series, that every time, if you can balance those two things, it doesn't really matter what the warrior's carrying. It doesn't matter what century he's from. That warrior will be victorious because of that. That's a Sun Tzu thing. Yeah,
and I believe Apache won that one, correct?
Pardon me?
Apache won that one, correct?
Did they? I don't. You know what? To be fair, I don't remember.
I believe it was the Apache.
Yeah, I tend to think, as much as I love Snakewalker, I tend to think the Gladiator probably should have won because they really had a little bit more of the superior weaponry at their
armor and weapons, yeah. And most Roman soldiers, if you look at the old gladiators, you know how these Roman soldiers are so tough and everything. Most of them would not fight a gladiator. It'd kind of be like going to somebody in the military that's had hand-to-hand training and then try to get them to go fight Chuck Liddell. Yeah. You're going to go fight Chuck Liddell about it. You can do it. You're a soldier. You fight on the field all the time. You kill people, go kill him. Go beat him up.
Yeah.
It wouldn't work that way. They go, wait a minute. No, that's all he does is, I don't think I'm going to go in there tonight. I mean, it'd be that kind of thing. I'm not going to go push him in the bar and spit in his eye. I mean, not to say that a soldier couldn't try to hurt him not fighting in that cage, but he knows that there's limitations to how his hand-to-hand skill is compared to somebody that's all he does, and he's excelled at it. So it'd be the same thing with the gladiators. These gladiators, that's all they did if they made it to the top and didn't die. So they just trained doing that. That's all they did. They didn't do nothing else. So it would be like saying, you're not going to be with your unit fighting this man, and he's going to be on the other side in a formation. You're going to be fighting him one-on-one. They go, wait a minute. I don't know about that. I'll go watch him tonight in the arena, but I don't necessarily want to fight him.
No, exactly right. And also, too, if you're fighting for your nation, that's one thing. If you're fighting for your life, that's an entirely different situation.
Very true. Very true.
Your motivations are a lot different at that point. Your survival depends on coming out of this thing alive, and you don't have a buddy covering your six as you're charging the hill. So,
right. What was the next episode after that? Was it Viking versus Samurai, or I can't remember what the next episode was?
It might have been Viking versus Samurai. To be fair, it was over 10 years ago, and we were working 16, 17 hours a day. And not all the episodes were shot in the same order they were released. At least I don't think they were. So because I know we jumped around a little bit here and there. So I just remember the specific weapons and the specific conflict, but I couldn't swear to which one was next. But I think Viking and Samurai might have actually been the next one. Because
I believe it was episode 2, but I could be wrong. I could go look it up, but I have all the episodes, so I could go through there and check it out.
Yeah, I think you might actually be right about that. Yeah, that was a hoot.
And that was a cold steel katana they used, correct? Or
it was.
And you rigged all the pigs and stuff, because you remember you telling me about that you had to find new ways to hang pigs up for each episode or put them together or something to be able to test on.
Yeah, I'm pardon me for being distracted and bringing up the next set of pictures. Yeah, my unofficial title on that show became Pig Rigger, because I was constantly, getting carcasses delivered, and then had to figure out how to thread. I actually took a cold steel knife that they make that is, it's very low profile. It's almost like a straight piece of metal dagger that's got like a diamond point or a diamond blade on it, but it's all in line, and it's got a nice hole at the end. And I would thread a piece of steel cable through that, and then I would take that knife and use it as a giant needle and come through the shoulders or whatever, in order to be able to run the cable right around the bone so we can lift it up. And then obviously,
nice.
When we put the chainmail armor on it, or when we stack it flat. In fact, there should be some pictures. I'm looking to see. There should be some pictures of pigs stacked and carcasses stacked one on top of the other. Yeah, there they are.
That was for the test where you try to cut through with a katana.
Right. There is one or two pictures here. There's one picture.
Wasn't that Brett Chan, I believe, that did that from The Last Samurai? The one who helped choreograph The Last Samurai, the fighting and stuff, and he's the one who tried to chop through all the bodies.
Yeah. He's the same guy who bananaed the blade on that shot.
Ooh. So he messed the blade up.
I have there's a picture that I sent you of him holding that thing. It's the last 30 seconds that blade was ever straight and true, because he came in good. Actually, the first pig he came down perfect on, and then somewhere was transitioning between the second and third, he threw his elbow out or his hip went off or something happened, and he moved, and it just the blade. That was it. It was done. And that was a fun day, because watching that happen was like, oh. And I think we'd only had the sword in our possession maybe a couple hours, because it had just showed up via FedEx, the day of shooting. That one was down to the wire. We had some difficulties with the production, and as a result of which that transferred into having vendors who were going to be very difficult to deal with, because they didn't necessarily want to deal with the production. So that became an issue. So getting things on time with their schedule became increasingly more compounded, In
that episode, I noticed, just to bring that up, they used the proper riveted and solid chainmail or mail. I call it mail a lot of times, or just chain armor.
Sure, yeah.
But they used proper mail in that episode. It was spectacular that they did that, because all these history programs, even ones with mic loads and stuff, and he's a friend of mine, I've talked to him online, they'll screw up and use butted mail or spent together. But that episode, that's one thing I can say about it. They actually used proper armor for the Viking. It was really cool. They tested it.
Well, that's doing a large part because the resources we had available to us, you had Stephen Meyer, you had Scott Frizzell, you had Anthony Pierce, Scott Connor, Matthew Locke, and a number of others that knew these weapons, that knew this world. And so we knew people who had things, and we knew where to get things. So when we ordered up that chainmail, as long as we were willing to pay the price for it, we actually had real chainmail. And I think that's a lot of times people don't, unless you're a historian or you're an enthusiast or you're into these sort of things, you don't know the difference. You're the average wardrobe person who doesn't really deal with medieval stuff. And even most production companies, close enough is good enough for if it looks like it. In this particular case, you had geeks at the helm. And so we were like, no, it has to be this, it has to be that. So we went ahead and got it. In fact, I remember it showing up brand new and shiny.
Yeah, we needed more of that. We needed you trying to push the historical accuracy, and I even talked to Barry Jacobson, and he said he would try to give them information. Like he'd go, look, people are noticing that, you didn't do this right later on, or you didn't, you should have focused on this, and this wasn't set up right, but they wouldn't listen to me, according to what he was telling me. He was the associate.
Yeah, the list of there was very short to a few people, but yes, there was a few that were absolutely, it became very clear over the period of time that we were working there that the only people who really cared about the integrity of the show was our crew. And I often credit that to the fact that because it was personal to us, we would have watched this show had we not been working on it. And because you did ask for our skills, and this is something that we all knew about, our work was authentic, and we wanted everything else to be authentic because you owe, in my opinion, you owe a debt to the fans. I've never lost touch in all the years I've been doing this. I never lost touch with the core of who I was when I started, and that's a fan. The same thrills and chills that run up my spine when the lights go down in the theater.
I enjoyed the program. I wished it was still on. I think if they would have probably listened to you and stuff like what Barry was saying about it, if they would have put that together and stayed in that, tried to stay more realistic than what would happen, they would have kept going. But I think they just kind of got out there as they went. They kind of like.
And especially Barry was a lot of fun to talk with. I enjoyed his company greatly. We were very like-minded in a lot of things. And he like Snake Blocker, could recognize, hey, you guys are really going the extra mile here. You're really working hard. It's very personal to us because we really liked, we really liked the idea of the show. We really liked getting our hands dirty. We liked building this stuff. We liked seeing it tested. I mean, we would come to work every day and we had a weapons room full of every weapon known to man. That was
right. Like just to break something up, we kind of missed on earlier, that Trident. You actually had to make castings of the Trident, didn't you? So they could have something to fight with when they reenacted it and not kill each other. Because you had the real Trident, but then you had to make the actual foam version or what have you to actually be able to do the reenactments without somebody getting skewered.
So I was just looking around. I'm sorry. Here we go. So this is a resin casting of the Obsidian knife that was used in the episode. And so this would have been the Obsidian blade.
Very nice.
This is the bone antler handle. And it's unpainted so that you can kind of see it in its raw form. What we did was we took a casting off the original knife, made a silicone mold of it, and then we could reproduce them in either a plastic or a rubber. This way we could fight with them because a real Obsidian knife, you barely tap it or go something wrong. That's basically like a glass blade on it. So it's very fragile. And
very sharp. Very, very sharp.
Very sharp. But the same thing is absolutely true with the Trident. In fact, when we had the scenes where the two were matching up against each other, you could clearly see how one slip, one mistake, one goof, and that's going right through somebody's leg. And there's no question about it. And just handling the real one and dealing with the net, I don't remember exactly how it went down, but I think the net got tangled around his something, and he went to move the Trident, and it cut somebody on the shoulder. It was that the barbs were that sharp, and we knew instantly, like this is a lethal weapon, and this is going to be very dangerous to try to work around. So in the interest of everyone's safety, we swapped them out with rubber weapons, which, it gives the entertainment. Remember, folks, this is always supposed to be entertainment. There's no sort of federal law that says that they're going to tell you the truth at all times. This is a show for entertainment purposes. And if the entertainment value is to see these two classic fighters moving around with each other. They want to be able to do it and have a lot of fun, throw a lot of energy at that. And one of the ways they can do that is to know that the weapons are rubber and they're not really going to get hurt.
Just like the fighting is choreographed. I mean, I got to hang out with Adrian Paul because I wanted to do a review of his sword experience. I don't know if you've met Adrian Paul or hung out with him, but he teaches a thing, and a lot of times he does it for charity or just for his own benefit to make a little bit of money. He goes out, hangs out with his fans, and they pay to learn a fight scene, like 15 moves or so, like choreography that they've probably never done before in their life. With Bokens, right? They usually use Bokens. But he didn't, originally I was just going to review him, but what ended up happening is he couldn't find anybody in this area to help him teach the class. He needed a partner, right, to do one side and he does the other. So I ended up actually reviewing it and doing both sides. So I have an idea what it's like in a movie trying to choreograph a fight scene. And it's totally different than fighting. Sorry, than sparring or fighting with somebody with weapons. It's its own art in its own way is what I'm saying. To make that look good and to pull it off right is not easy. And if you were out there with razor sharp weapons, I don't think it would be a good thing.
Oh no. And
right.
a lot of times people overestimate their abilities with these things and how safe they are. And that's usually a red flag that someone's going to get hurt.
True. Very true.
A lot of times people refer to me as a weapons expert, and I'm like, no, there is no such thing. Don't ever call me that because there is no such thing. And anybody who's had, again, martial arts training or military training, their sensei, their DI, somebody has told them along, their instructor, someone has told them along the way, if you run across somebody who says they're an expert, turn and run and get the hell out of there because they're not. So that going into it if you've been dealing with weapons all your life. And both Barry and Snake Blocker. Well, Snake Blocker demonstrated his proficiency the day I met him, and you could tell talking to Barry that he knew how to hold it. He knew how to handle it. So we were able to get certain shots that were dramatic. But honestly, if you put those two people in a ring together, that'd be a 30-second match. Someone's going to die really quick. And really, if you put Snake Blocker and Barry in the same ring at the same time, it's a coin toss. It's a real coin toss as to who's really walking out of there.
Right. Gotcha.
It doesn't last more than a minute, but one person's not walking out.
Right.
What
was I going to say about about the computer simulation? You were telling me something about the Alienware. They actually sent it to all the computers and stuff to.
Yeah, the Alienware. Yeah. So I talked to Max about that one day. We were sitting there and I asked Max about what is this program that's supposedly going to calculate the probable outcomes and all the rest of that. And Max leaned over and he looked at me and he goes, there isn't one. They bought the computer. They were given the computers for a promotion, but they didn't pay for the software. So when you see Max sitting there doing this, he's actually checking his email, which I thought was pretty funny. I was like, really?
Well, sometimes they'll put information on an Excel spreadsheet. I've seen that. He'll be putting it in Excel. If you look at it, it's just a spreadsheet. And yes, there's ways if you know how to set up calculations, to compare things, but it would be the equivalent of Dungeons and Dragons, like rolling dice percentages.
Exactly.
This guy's got this much armor. This can go through here. This can't.
Yeah.
This, make some kind of random, because I kind of figured that they might have done something like that, but it also seemed like towards the end there, they were just like picking a favorite or something,
Yeah, as far as I know, that's how they did it. None of the outcomes ever made sense, and a lot of times we would shoot multiple.
It'd be an X factor. You would think who was going to win by watching all the stuff, like you were saying. You assumed the Gladiator would beat the Apache, right? But that was you looking at all the testing and what you compiled in your mind, and all of a sudden, I think they said the Apache won. Probably. If I'm wrong, yes. Guys out there, forgive me. But the point is, they did that too, I think, to make it more exciting. Because if you have a match and you have a favorite and then the underdog wins, it looks better. So they try to make one guy look like the underdog, whether he was or not, who knows? But and then at the end, he would win because of this X factor that they threw in that we didn't consider.
Absolutely. And honestly, it is entertainment. That's the thing.
True.
It's entertainment all along. And as long as people were entertained, then the job's finished, as far as they're concerned.
And these are classic bar arguments. It'd be like if we went in and sat down and started drinking a beer together and, well, what do you think about a pirate versus a knight? To go into the next one here. Yeah, and you go, oh, I don't know. The pirates got firearms and gunpowder, Well, the
Not
later
necessarily.
century knight, to his defense, could have had firearms and gunpowder too. They just wouldn't have been quite the same quality, but he could have very
No.
easily had it. Yeah, a later century knight, late enough century, there was pirates around while there was knights. Yeah,
Sure.
so I mean, we're talking 17th century or something. So I don't know how to explain what I mean, but you know what? Depends on what period you get them from and how
Yeah.
how apples to oranges they really are, or if they know who each other was. You know? So
Yeah, it really depends on the techniques, but also too the knights didn't have explosives. They pretty much never used explosives, and pirates did.
yeah, the only thing they might have had would have been like a matchlock. They had some. What they had is they had some basically match lit hand cannons. They did have some of
Yeah.
those, but they
Yeah.
weren't real common and they weren't loaded quickly. You had it loaded up. You went up there, bang! If you could get close enough to a guy and try to put a hole through his armor, and that's pretty
Well,
much it. Yeah.
I mean, pirates also had grenados. Let's not forget grenados.
Oh, and you made those. You were telling me how you had to come by those without actually being able to acquire them. You had to create those from scratch.
So the way it would work was they would give you the episode breakdowns, and they would usually give you 5, 10, 15, 20-ish scenarios of wish lists. We'd like them to have a cannon. We'd like them to have grenados. We'd like to do this. We'd like to do that. Obviously, they're going to whittle it down to what they really want to do, but they would always give you a heads up as to where their thoughts were going, what was practical, what could they do, what could my department do, because after a couple of episodes, we sort of proved that we were resilient and being able to come up with last-minute desperate solutions to bullshit problems created by other effing people. So that was kind of the designation of our job. And I liked the idea of grenados because I liked the idea of the explosions, and that was something I wanted to see too. I wanted to see if we hung a pig in an area and we exploded these things and we built these things properly, what kind of damage would those grenades have done? Because that's pretty advanced given the time period that it was actually in. That was really fascinating to me. And I remember everybody on our team had call signs. Everybody had a nickname. Mine's Red Dog, and a gentleman with probably the best hands in sculpting that I've ever met in my entire life, a gentleman by the name of Scott Connor, former Marine, had real anger issues, so his nickname was the Hulk. We called him the Hulk, and he would.
Yeah, you told me that he would actually rage on stuff because he couldn't.
Rage. And I remember him raging about, I'm giving the morning briefing about, hey, so we're going to be looking at doing the grenados. He's like, what? Are you crazy? What are we going to do? Are we going to go down to grenados? How are we going to make grenados? He just, he'd have this morning rant that was just, and then he would get down to work and it would all turn out fine. And as it would turn out, we decided we got some baking clay. We got some clay that we could definitely kill fire. And we made a mock chef kill out of a couple of propane tank heaters and some foam and some plywood, so that we had like an easy bake oven. And if you've ever been to Smart and Final or any of your typical Mexican cantinas, the little round dishes with the 3 legs that look like a stone bowl that your salsa comes in, we took those, and Scott in his brilliance figured out how to lay the clay in there and give us the perfect thing. So when you popped it out, it was half of the grenados. So he did 2 of those, put them together, hogged it out, put a little cork on the top, and we baked them. And I remember we were figuring it out when the segment producer for us was a man by the name of Bill Martens. And Bill had come out thinking, okay, production's off their rocker. They're crazy. We know you're not going to be able to do this. And it had been about 2 or 3 hours since we'd had the initial meeting, and I'd already met with my guys, and we were already in process. We thought we could pull this off. And Bill came out and he said, well, he hadn't seen any of the work we'd done. And
right.
He said, no, I think this is crazy. And then he turned around, and there was 6 or 7 of them that were made sitting on the table. And he went, where did you get these? Scott looked at him and goes, oh, we just went down to Grenados, and Grenados R Us right down here on the end of the street. And Bill just bought off on that. Like he didn't know. And so we made those from scratch, and Scott did an amazing job. And then my original Jedi Master for pyrotechnics is a man by the name of Robert Hutchinson, known as Hutch. And as soon as I got involved with the show and I knew that we were going to have what we would call a class 1 level of pyrotechnics, he's a 1-card holder. I called Hutch. I said, we're going to do flaming arrows, and we're going to do grenados, and we're going to do all this stuff. And he was like, yeah, man. And I remember you know, you have to be very careful. You have to be permitted, because even though we're building a grenade from scratch for a movie prop, that's actually still a felony. That if you talk to ATF or a number of other federal law enforcement agencies, building a destructive device that you intend to blow up is actually a no-no.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. And I've actually, one time my channel got banned, and I'm not going to lie to you, I had made some little clay grenades, kind of like you're talking about, that were experimental for early century. You know, they were like 13th century grenades, because somebody has, you know, they found some, you know, clay. And
Sure.
I didn't put any shrapnel in them. I didn't do anything like that. They didn't blow up very well. They just made pretty much a nice, you know, like a flash. You know, they weren't a big explosion or anything. And I put it up as a special, and it'd been up for 4 years. I had YouTube take me down over it because it violated their guidelines, and I lost my channel. I had 40 something, or was it 40,000 signatures on a petition to get my channel back up, and YouTube put me back up, but it was all over that. So the video's still there, but it's adult only.
Right.
So then I made these little you know what I'm saying? Kind of like what you did. Not exactly. It was experimenting with something else to see, and I determined that I don't think they were grenades. What I made. Yeah. This was an experiment to determine that, because I'd put gunpowder in them. I think they probably put oil in them and threw them. You know, like incineraries.
Sure.
Yeah. But since I had done that, YouTube decided that that was a very bad thing. So, I mean, I could see that right there. Now, I think after the fact, after you've done it and done a video, I can't come and get you for something you've done as long as you didn't hurt anybody. But if they catch you doing it, yeah, they can like give you a big fine and arrest you.
I have a number of friends who would refer to that as the nanny state. And while I can see their side of that coin, I also think that that's the kind of information that should be restricted to adults. I wouldn't want kids getting into that. I mean, I myself, my father was an engineer for Liddell, and he had all kinds of chemicals in the shop and in the lab, and I was notorious for breaking in and getting in stuff. I mean, I was messing around with stuff that I had absolutely no business doing, but you couldn't keep me out. And I set fire to the backyard a couple times, but we had an acre of land, you know, I mean.
I understand. I grew up making my own gunpowder because my dad taught me making little rockets and little cannons and stuff. So I never thought it was a big deal. I mean, we do an experiment like that. They do it on the History Channel all the time. Why would YouTube blow up over it if no one was hurt? It was done in a safe manner, you know, out in the middle of nowhere.
Well, you know, I mean, there's something to be said, and that was actually one of the problems that plagued the show. There's something to be said for apathy versus respect. You know, you can't be apathetic about a lot of things. You need to really take things, if you're going to get into this area and you're going to mess with these things, you have to respect them. You have to respect fire. You have to respect gunpowder. You have to respect
certainly
what's going to happen with these things, sharp blades, so on and so forth. And that's where I think a lot of people get it wrong. They think, oh, you weapons nuts, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, actually, it takes a great deal of self-discipline and respect for all of it to make sure that you don't hurt somebody. And that's the bigger part of the job. And that was one thing I was very happy to say about my team, is that when we were on set watching over everybody that was working, whether they were cameramen or crew or the talent or whatever, you know, we were there specifically as a safety device, just to make sure people didn't do it. I mean, we'd have live. I remember one time, I can't remember what was it sitting out on the table. Was it a blade? I can't remember what it was in specific. I think it was a hatchet. I'm almost certain it was a hatchet and a sword. And they were sitting on the table, and they were incredibly sharp. And I made the announcement to the entire crew, please, please do not touch these. Do not pick these up. If you want to look at it, and I'm sure you do, because everybody does, let me know. We'll come over. We'll make sure you're handling it safely. Just don't touch it. No sooner did I make that statement and walk away, but a camera guy walked over and just, you know, and I'm like, wait, we just told you not to do that. You know, what the hell is your problem? So there was a certain amount of lack of respect, you know, and then that always leads to bad things, you know, that doesn't end well for anybody. So anyway.
Oh, didn't you actually, weren't you the one who fired the blunderbuss?
Yes.
And you set up the breastplate on the analog where the blood ran out from the inside and everything when it went through?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually shouldered that thing.
So
because,
that wasn't the actor or the I shouldn't call him an actor, but whoever the expert was, it wasn't, because I don't know that much details about it. But that was you actually firing the actual blunderbuss.
Absolutely. Those weapons were rented and under the care of Mike Tristano. Mike Tristano, you should look him up. His resume is enormous. He's a dear friend of mine. I've known him for 25, 30 years. He is one of the premier, if not the premier, weapons guys in town. One of the shows that he's most notably responsible for is a TV show called Top Shot. He handled all the weapons and stuff on that. Like he is a premier weapons guy, and he's been a friend for many years. So I called him and I said, "Listen, we're doing this show. I'd like to get some good black powder weapons from you." So he came out. Well, I think he had a friend with him, and the idea was we put the chest plate for the knights over a foam torso, an AB foam torso that we had made, and we carved out the inside of the foam torso, and we had vacuum sealed bags of blood. And I personally packed and loaded all of that stuff in there. So, you know, you've got your steel, you've got your foam, you've got your blood, you're ready to go. It's up on the wall. Pack this thing up with the powder and the balls. 3, 2, 1, here we go. Pow. And I remember being a weapons enthusiast, but not really into black powder weapons. I was very curious about that whole aspect of it. And I can tell you that when you fire or you fight in that sort of situation, there's a couple of things that are straight up bullshit. One of them is the second you fire, everything goes white cloud. There's nothing but smoke.
Black powder is white smoke. I'm sorry, unless it's modern smokeless. You know how they have the Pyrodex or whatever that's modern, and it's made to be like black powder, but you use real black powder, it's smoke. You're going to see a big smoke.
And so I capped it off, and I just was amazed at how well nothing above my line I could see. But I looked down below the rifle, and I could see the bottom part of the plate of armor and the bottom part of the stand, and it was just raining blood. I mean, it was a waterfall of blood. I'm like, well, I knew I hit the damn thing.
It went through.
It did, and actually, I actually fired all the pistols in that show that were. Because we demonstrated the flintlock pistol, and I think we did 2 of those, and then we did the blunderbuss. And I can tell you from personal experience that, you know, as much as I love Johnny Depp and I love Pirates of the Caribbean, that garbage of him swinging through the air and popping somebody, there's just no way.
Not with a flintlock, with the powder,
not in the pouring rain, not while you're swinging on a vine, and definitely not going to hit exactly what you're aiming at. You got like a 1 in 500 chance that that's going to go the direction you want it to, because there's no rifling on the barrel.
No rifling's in it. It's got a wadding around the ball to make it fit tight enough.
Yeah. So even for someone like myself who's enthusiastic about weapons, to actually do some of these tests firsthand was actually a lot of fun, because, you know, God's truth, I had no way of knowing how some of those tests were going to turn out. You would just be surprised. Like, I think it's not going to go this way. But a wise man once said, one test beats everybody else's bullshit theoretical opinion.
Oh, and then we have an episode. I wish I could see the pictures right now. I was trying to access them. But,
which ones were you talking about?
I was gonna bring up pictures, but I was also gonna bring up an episode where it was Mafia versus the Yakuza, correct?
Oh yeah, Mafia versus Yakuza.
And you procured the actual artifacts that were used in it, correct?
I did. Yes, I did. I had a friend who former judge of New York, former police officer in New York, corrections officer, and runs a museum for history of Mafia and stuff in New York. And he actually sent me pieces from the collection that had been actually used in an actual crime. That, you know, there was an ice pick that was had actually been used to terminate someone's existence, and it still had like dried blood on the handle and stuff. But that was really cool. And same with the sawed-off shotgun. That's where the double-barrel sawed-off.
Yeah, they were surprised, correct? You brought it in the meeting and just threw it down to them. They were like, didn't know what they were going to do. And they freaked out.
You know, it seemed to be almost like a conspiracy theory we had, that they were constantly trying to trip me up. Like they were coming up with weird stuff just to see if I couldn't come up with it. And I always took them at the word that that's what they wanted. So when they said, we got to have this, I was like, okay, let me go figure that out. And again, you know, that was one of those times where my resources came into effect. And I called my buddy in New York and said, hey, do you know where I could get my hands on these? Or can we, you know, get a casting or a mold, or, you know, what can we do? And he was like, yeah, we can do it. So he FedExed the stuff to me, and I think that was like a Thursday night we'd had that conversation. Monday morning, I walked into the production office. It had arrived Sunday night, and I walked in and said, "Oh, by the way, there it is." And I think a lot of that was we wanted them to quit changing their minds. So the sooner we could get whatever it was they asked for, then they would be locked into that idea. And you know, because a lot of times they'd say, "Well, we want this," and you'd be halfway down the road, and they'd say, "No, we don't want that anymore. Now we want this." And you're like, "Oh, you're running over this way to do it." There was a lot of wasted time on our part because they couldn't cross the finish line with a decision on a pretty regular basis. And they would push it to the 9th and 10th and 11th hour on a regular basis. The day we went to the firing range, I'll never forget this. It's 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. We're supposed to be on set down by LAX. I think call time was 6 a.m. I'm doing my last minute of prepping and stuff, and I'm trying to get that. I remember my crew and I were all still here. We should have been asleep in bed, but we were busy finalizing the last bits of targets and whatever. When the showrunner sends an email about all this laundry list of stuff he wants to change and add to it that I'm supposed to miraculously have in 3 hours when I should actually be asleep. You know, I should actually be getting my rest.
That would suck.
And so there was a lot of times where professionalism was out the window. And the thing that really upset us all about that is like he had 4 or 5 weeks to figure out what he wanted, and you know, to pitch it out in the last 20 minutes of the night, that's ridiculous. So yeah, there was a lot of that sort of bad behavior on the part of production on that show, and that ultimately hurt everybody. That hurt the fans, that hurt the talent, that hurt us. It just, it could have been a longer show, could have been a better show, could have been a more interesting show, could have been a more honest show, had they actually had people in there who actually cared about the product they were putting out.
Right, like I noticed that you used the perfect male for the Viking, which is probably around the 9th century. And then one of the things that I had to think about that I was upset about is they used butted or bent together male for William Wallace when he's fighting Shaka Zulu. And I'm sitting there going, what is wrong with these people? They did it right the first time, which no one else has ever done that. You got to give them credit for it. No one, your show had only actually used proper male for a TV program, historical, close enough. It's not going to be like one out of a museum, but it's close enough. It's riveted and solid. But the other one, they just used bent together male, and the spear just kind of slid right in because it just unbends. And I was like, why?
By the time we got to that, there was a lot of apathetic reaction on the part of production that basically said, you guys are making too much of a big deal out of this. Nobody cares. It's chainmail. And I kept trying to drive the point home that the people who care are the same ones who are watching your show. The people who know the difference, that's why they are the ones watching this show. If you want to do something more vague and more arbitrary, then go do something else. This is a historical reenactment show.
Correct.
This should be historically accurate to the absolute best. And if it can't be, you need to say, well, this type of material is no longer available, so we had to use this synthetic version or whatever. But, you should come clean about that. And I think that had a lot more to do with them saying, we want wardrobe to handle that. And they grab chainmail and stick it on the guy and stick him out there.
Like I had Casey Hendershot on, and he was talking about, you were telling me how you set the targets up. You did the 2 spear throws.
Oh, yeah.
Came up with the perfect idea for the targets. And I actually want to try that in real life. I want to set that up for targets for me if I can get a hold of some.
I know I sent you pictures of them in there. I wish there were more. I'm looking at them right now.
I'll put those pictures up.
My the throwing targets. These are really for anybody out there, anybody at all, amateur or whatever. Even if you need a good piece of recreation, find a greenery or a nursery company in the area that are cutting down palm trees. Get them to cut you some palm tree rounds, and you can screw into them with some eye hooks, and you can get them up in the air with some chains. And the nice thing about a palm tree is if you soak that thing soaking wet, even if you get a glancing blow on your blade or your hatchet or your knife or whatever, it'll stick. And it'll stick in such a way that it won't hurt it. It won't bend the blade. You won't lose an edge. And you just get it soaking wet so that you can just throw those things at it every day. And that was how we did those. That worked out super well. You could put them in a swing. You could raise them up and down. You had target markings on there. You could connect them together. And it didn't matter what you threw at it, you could stick. In fact, there was plenty of times when we needed to think, or we needed to, I don't know, in the same manner most people would go play a game of darts to kind of unwind. a bunch of us would walk over with throwing knives or hatchets or whatever, and we'd pick a target. And sometimes we'd all stand side by side and we'd throw all at the same time at our target. Sometimes you'd just walk over. We were using it for the archery range. So if you're into that at all and you want a renewable source, you want a good source, something that will not damage your blade but give you a good training purpose, highly recommend palm tree rounds. The best way to go.
And wet them down. I like that idea. I really, really do. Oh, what was the other one you were telling me? I guess it was the Aztec that was using a sling. And I've done some stuff on my channel with slings. And there's different ways to sling. People will argue with you what you're doing. But it's so hard to be accurate. It's almost impossible. What I'm saying is unless that's all you do all day long is practice with a sling, you're going to have a very hard time hitting anything dead on. It's exactly what you want.
So that was early on. That was part of we gave that to the Gladiator as a weapon. They wanted Gladiator to have another weapon, so that's what it was.
I thought it was. I couldn't remember. I thought it was the Aztec. I'm wrong. I could be wrong. Sorry.
I just remember that the idea was we made the leather sling. We were pretty good about how to throw it and work it, and we covered that. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to take that odd looking round rock, or basically a rock, and they wanted to shoot it out of an air cannon into some ballistic gel. And I was Max and was it Dr. Adrian? And then there was one other guy standing there, and forgive me, I don't remember who it was. Now, it was my air cannon, and I know for a fact that we're not going to take an oblong, not round thing and stuff it in a metal tube and open the valve and hope that it travels straight down the barrel. It's most likely going to
get jammed,
wedge itself into the barrel. So Max and those guys are pretty smart too, and Max was the one that pointed out that this would obviously be a calamity. And this was when we were just meeting each other, and they were kind of thinking me more of a geek, and we weren't really friends yet. And so they were kind of hard on me and teasing me and my guys, and we were kind of pushing back. And I chose that barrel because I had a steel ball that would go perfectly down that barrel. So Max and company are standing by, and they're talking to me about all the dangers and all the pressures. And I'm going, oh, yeah. I'm like, so what you're saying is we should probably have a steel ball. You guys have steel balls? And they were like, no. And I reached in my pocket and pulled out 2 steel balls. I said, fortunately, I do have steel balls. At which point, the couple of the women who were on the production side lost it. Like, just realized in that moment that I had been setting them up for the last 20 minutes. It kind of was a domino effect down the line when they all started laughing. And we dropped that steel ball down in there, and we shot it downrange into the body dummy. And then when they went to do the hey, let's take a look at it, the exploratory on it, they literally pulled the one out and swapped the other one in the palm of their hand. And I think it was the doctor who stuck his hand in there, and I'm like, literally, you can swap them out and you look like you pulled it right out. So It's a bit of a close-up magic trick. Otherwise, there's no way to have gotten that shot, And to be fair, again, it's an entertainment show. It's not
technically it could have been possible, but you would have had to have somebody with the slinging skill to do it and the proper, glandy or whatever to do it with. Because I had to use lead to get it to go into gel. I'm going to be honest. It's not easy to get that hit.
It's a very difficult thing to film. I mean, we spent a couple of hours getting guys slinging.
So technically you rigged it, but it's not completely a lie because it's plausible. It's just have anybody on your set that can pull it off without doing it in that manner.
Honestly, if you overlay the physics of small rock coming out of a leather thong and round steel ball coming out of a tube and said, okay,
same thing.
The trajectory and velocity are going to be just about the same. And for the expediency of accuracy, what kind of penetration are we getting here? So I think to that end that was probably a little bit more of a legitimate test, even though we cheated the hell out of it. Certainly better than anything else we did on that show. There were a couple.
Did you do one with a steel, a bolt or something from a crossbow that you couldn't fire on the crossbow, and they wanted to fire steel out of it, so you had to figure out a way to make it look like you did?
So again, another one of those production nightmares where we weren't going to do a certain crossbow test. We weren't going to do a test with this. We were just going to talk about it or shoot it. And Bill Martens shows up in my office, I think about an hour before lunch. So I had roughly about 2 hours, and said, listen, they want to drive a steel bolt through this thing. Well, the crossbow we had, there's no way it would fire a steel bolt. It just did not have the strength or the power to do it. And I had to literally pull a monkey out of my butt in under 2 hours. I didn't have the steel. I didn't have anything there. And fortunately, we were in downtown Los Angeles. And actually, we were kind of more on the industrial side of East LA. And I knew that there was a forge and there was a local blacksmith forge just a few blocks away, kind of an artisan thing. So I hauled ass on foot. I ran down the street and I told these guys, I found the forge, very nice people, very artsy. I said, look, this is what I'm doing. This is what I need. I need a piece of steel. I need to be able to round this, and, you know, and the clock is ticking because when we come back from lunch, we got to be able to shoot this. So I found the steel. They helped me. I grounded it out. I made it all look great. I came back. I took a wooden dowel. I made it the same length at the same point, and then I scenically painted both to match identical, so you could not tell one from the other. And then literally by the time the paint was drying, Bill walked up to me and said, hey, we're like 10 minutes out from shooting. Are we going to have this? Not wanting to fail? No, sir, here we go. They're all ready to go. So the first shot is him hitting the tickler, and we see it fly from the weapon. I think they might even actually have footage of it going across camera. And then when it comes up to the target, I drilled a slight little pilot hole. I stuck the metal in there, and then I hit it with a sledgehammer, and they put the camera behind the other side of the board. So when it punches through the wood, that's actually me hitting it with a sledgehammer from the other side.
Excellent. I like your idea. That works. Because
you
didn't have an 800,000-pound crossbow, which they didn't have heavy one, you know, like a winch or whatever crossbow, but you made it seem as if you had a more powerful crossbow. So that kind of makes sense. Which you could have that powerful a crossbow if you wanted.
If we had been given the proper time and the proper money and the proper all of that, you know, if you had told me 4 weeks ago when we first talked about this that, yes, that's what I want to do. So there was a lot of that went on that we had to kind of pull monkeys out of thin air. And, you know, if you're on a movie set and it's all make-believe and you're coming up with it or whatever, that's fine. But when you're talking about historically accurate weapons with fans who know these weapons,
and know the warriors. Some of them know the warriors. Like my wife, she knew the Maori. I was going to bring that up. And she's from New Zealand. And she realized they didn't have a stingray spear, which we think was Aboriginal, I think. Or it could have been, I think, Aboriginal. And then the other thing was not Maori, but Maui, the shark tooth club. But I think it was because they wanted more entertaining weapons, and they wouldn't have had a bigger variety of weapons if they would have just went with what they used. They used everything and added stuff to it.
That's why the Gladiator, she got the wrist rocket sling thing because he didn't have enough cool weapons, and the Apache had all the cool stuff. And I said, well, you know, different time periods, different locations, different things. I mean, you know, a lot of times people don't need extra. Sometimes less is more. You know, right.
That's what I saw. It was almost like whoever designed this was thinking of video games, you know, or like playing Dungeons and Dragons that you can just walk around with all the stuff on you, some mount magically, and it doesn't hinder you until you need it. And you just pop it out, you know, like a cartoon character, like a big mallet or something out of your pocket. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I could not picture the poor little samurai running around with this big old cannonball, a pole arm, his swords. You know, everything he had is Yumi and all that on him at one time and engaging in combat and just switching weapons whenever he wanted. I'm like, how did he, you know, there'd be no way to do that. Just like the Viking wouldn't have every weapon on him. You know, he'd carry a few weapons, but he wouldn't carry everything. He might have a spear, an axe, a sword, and a shield. Yeah. You know? Yeah, you agree with me, right? Yeah.
A lot of times things were done based on artistic intent. Maybe it was the wardrobe costume person who said, I'm going to put this on him because I think it looks good, without it having to be historically accurate. Well, no one will know. Well, you know, if it's a Roger Corman movie from the 60s and it's a bunch of guys running across camera, you're probably right. But if it's a show that's about weapons and the guys who use them specifically, right, historically accurate, then your audience base for that is actually people who know what they're looking at. And that's not something you can that's just not something you can replace quickly or easily. You know, that level of experience is, I mean, like I said, you know, you reached out to me and a number of other fans have reached out to me over the years with questions about this show, which is why I agreed to do the interview, because I would get vicious hate mail about the outcomes and about the alternate endings and about different stuff. And I feel sorry for these people because I'm like, yeah, you kind of got cheated. Yes, you're right. got to understand, pal, I had nothing to do with that. You know, if the weapons were real and they were accurate and that stuff, that was my job. The fact that nobody died on that show, that was part of my job.
Very important job, though. Very important job.
There were people that got hurt. I happened to be, in fact, you talked about the Halbert scene, and if you look closely, you can see a big Band-Aid on my hand. That's because just 2 days prior, while we were filming something else for the Viking episode, I was actually running a stone down the blade because they'd hit it or they'd done something, and there was a bunch of dimples and a bunch of nastiness on there, and I wanted to kind of chew that out a little bit. And I had such a hard time dealing with all these young people that were working on the show that had never been around film before, and they didn't know to be quiet, and they didn't know to not whisper, and when they'd say quiet on set, people would still keep talking. And there was always this level of unprofessionalism behind me. And I needed to do this where I could have it ready to go on set. So I actually stationed 2 of my guys behind me and said, look, I'm going to be sharpening this big knife. Make sure no one comes up and bumps into me or touches me because my arm's going to be going, down it. And sure enough, they managed to distract my 2 guys, and someone else, as I'm running my hand down, it comes up and taps me on the shoulder and pushed my hand down the blade, and I sliced my hand. And it was that kind of stuff that was always an inherent danger factor because, again, outside of my crew, very few people took it seriously, if anywhere at all.
I totally understand.
Our first AD did not care about safety. Did not, he was just showing up and kind of walking his way through it. And honestly, that's his job. You would think that that's the guy that, more important than anything, that's something he should be paying attention to. But he was pretty much worthless. And so there wasn't a lot of safety control in those days on that show. In fact, I remember vividly, and you've spoken to one of these guys because I talked to him since, and I was in a producer's office pleading with her to stop what was going on because what they were about to do was so dangerous, someone was going to get hurt. Right. And in the midst of us having that conversation, you hear a snap and a crack and a tinkle, and the axe head had broken off the piece and landed and embedded in the wall. That, by the way, embedded in the wall of her on the other side of her office, directly behind her head. So when we came out of her office and back out onto set, it was sticking out of the drywall. But you talked to the actor that
Casey Hendershot's the one that did that, and he told him, "I'll try, but this thing, the handle seems really flimsy to him." Is what he said. It wasn't big enough around, and wasn't, he didn't think it would. Oh, and they were trying to get him to chop through a big block of wood. Is what he said. And when he hit, however he hit, somehow he doesn't know if he hit too far up or hit the blade wrong, or it torqued it wrong. It just went flying up in the air. Is what he said. So he said they had to improvise another axe because they didn't have a Viking axe, so they had to make an axe that would work for that scene.
And if I remember correctly, that might have just been like an oak or a pine wood that was stained purple because it should have been a purple heartwood or an ironwood of some type. And because it was more of a showpiece and not a practical piece.
The Dane axe, yeah.
Yeah, it failed. And actually, a special shout out to Sword in the Stone and Sword in the Lance and those guys. They, first of all, are legends in this town, and they do phenomenal work. And they really are the unsung heroes of that show because they were constantly pulling stuff out of their inventory. But they were very clear, like, you can't hurt somebody with this, or you can't smash this, or this is just a showpiece. Or they would say, hey, look, this is the real thing, So, and they were really a lot of fun to work with, and they were nice guys, and they really had great, beautiful stuff. I suggest anybody, I'm a quick plug for them, go check them out online and just take a look at their stuff. And if you happen to be in the Los Angeles, Burbank area, make an appointment, go by and check them out. Their stuff is just gorgeous. Just gorgeous.
Awesome. It was really nice having you on today. We're going to run out of time, and I definitely want you back on because you've actually done a lot of other projects and movies and stuff, correct? You did like Batman Returns and Tank Girl, and you've done you've done just about everything. So it would be nice to sit on and just hear some of your stories, like working on different projects. If you'd like to come back on sometime and hang out,
I'd love to come back. We
can even talk about Deadliest Warrior again because there's stuff we didn't even get to cover. I don't think.
I'd love to talk more about Deadliest Warrior, and I'd just like 2 seconds to shout out to the fans and say thank you to keeping us on the air for so long, and thank you for everybody's support, and that. People like myself in my field, in my position, we don't get this opportunity very often. It's usually the actors or the production or something like that gets to sit down and talk to the people. But to be fair with you, we're the same people as you. We're the same people watching the show. We do this so that fans can have something. I mean, Indiana Jones going after that gold idol, if it's not just the right perfect gold idol, the shot doesn't work as well. So we kind of love what we do and do what we love, and it's a very special treat to be hosted on a show like this. And you've been very gracious and very generous with your time. And I'd love to come back at any point. And I want to say thank you again to all the fans and to my illustrious crew. My crew actually really, they worked so hard on that show that they literally, one of them actually was hospitalized after the show because suffering from mental exhaustion. That's how severe that show was.
Oh gosh, that's hard to take. Yeah, they must have been pretty hard on y'all.
24 hours a day for 20 weeks or whatever it was. I mean, it was a grind.
And you wanted it right. I mean, you wanted it historically right. So it's anything that wasn't right wasn't your fault. It was the people casting. It was I mean, I understand it was them picking what weapons this guy's going to use and not a specific time period, stuff like that. So they were just going for entertainment, and you were trying to go for what they said it was. You wanted the actual historical accuracy and the realism, and I respect you for that.
So much of the weapons that you saw on that show were made by my crew. The shields, the Viking shields.
I have pictures of those. That's something we didn't bring up earlier, and I'm sorry. I was going to ask you that if we didn't cover everything. Those shields look very, very nice. I've got several pictures there. I'll put those up so people can see them.
And some of those, some of the more intricate ones, actually, again, that's all Steve. Steve was amazing at that, and he busted those out. He made the shields. We got the oak. He put it together. We did the hot, bar through the center and everything else. And then he would cover them with leather and sit there and tool up the leather, and just gorgeous work. So, this was a team effort, and I was very proud of my crew who came through it with flying colors. And we wouldn't have had a show had it not been for them. That's for sure.
Definitely. I don't think the show would exist because of from my channel, what I've done. I'm going to let you go here, but I was going to say, for me trying to set up analogs and test weapons and set up armor and everything, if you don't have somebody that knows what they're doing that can do that, like I said, you would have just had a bunch of people arguing with each other over who would win. There wouldn't be anything entertaining to watch. So it wasn't for y'all.
We had those kind of conversations in the shop too. Like, it was literally like a geek bar in there where we were talking about ninjas versus Spartacus or whatever. We had a lot of our own conversations, but that might be for another episode.
Yeah, let's do that later. And I'm sorry, I'll let you go. Sorry to drag it on there.
It's okay. I love it. I mean, hey, during the quarantine, what else am I going to do, right?
Yeah, be sure down below, everybody. Tell us if you want him back on. I definitely want to have him back on. And appreciate everybody who stayed with us through this long interview or fun chat, because I just totally enjoyed it. Sorry. Anyway, as always, farewell. And we got Yao coming in and saying bye, I think.
Hey, buddy.
You can say bye. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can always sport a Thegn Thrand YouTube channel shirt that you can get over at viralstyle.com at the Thegn Thrand merchandise store. We have coffee mugs, koozies, a wide variety of shirts and hats. You can also help support us on Patreon, and if you do that, you'll also get exclusive content that can only be seen there.